Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another class of Diabetes University. So for those of you that are brand new to this program, welcome. My name is John Bedenberg. I am a dietitian and diabetes educator in the Employee Wellness Program. And for those of you that are returning, welcome back. We're glad to have you. Today, we're going to be talking about something that is always been a challenge for persons with diabetes, and that's trying to dine out while still keeping our blood sugar under control. And there's an art and a science to it. So today I'm going to share with you some fundamental guidelines to help you navigate different menus and different environments as we for many of us, re-embark upon dining out after the pandemic and after we've been successfully vaccinated. It's time to venture back out. So keeping in mind of all those precautions, we still have to be mindful of our diabetes as well. So that's going to be the focus of today's talk. So I'm going to go ahead and hide my video here and get right into our presentation. So if there are any questions that come up along the way, you can type them in the chat and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. But for those individuals that are brand new to the program, again, welcome. This is something that I started in January as a way to try to connect information to persons and their families affected with diabetes. So you'll see a list of scheduled sessions throughout the year, and I just encourage you to attend whichever sessions interest you the most. Everything that we talk about is recorded and is placed on our website, so you can access it at any time. So even though we're delivering this live and there is potential for Q&A, if you have to step off and want to catch the end of it, it'll be posted on the Employee Wellness website here at UF Health Jacksonville. Now, we also give wellness credit points towards participation in this program. So if you attend 6 sessions throughout the calendar year, January through December, we'll give you 100 points towards your wellness credit. Now, again, this is only for those individuals who have Gator Care. So if you're not a Gator Care subscriber, it's irrelevant. You're still welcome to attend, but you don't have to worry about that piece. Now, for that group that is trying to get the credit, I am going to share with you a very brief post-session quiz. And really this quiz is not meant to stress you out. It's really just an easy way to track attendance. So at the very end of this session, you'll see a link for a very short quiz that you'll take. You'll also include your email address in there. And from that, I can easily send you copies of all the slides that we talk about today. So again, sit back, relax, maybe enjoy some of your lunch meal as we talk about healthy eating away from home. It's always good to kind of do a little bit of brief assessment when we talk about dining out challenges. So I'm going to show you a whole bunch of different foods, and you just simply say to yourself, does it have carbs? You can shout it, you can type it in the chat box, it doesn't really matter, but we want to see where you are in terms of carbohydrate knowledge. Oh, I forgot to mention the other thing that we're going to discuss today is really looking at some other potential resources for helping you make dining out decisions. So in addition to navigating the menus and looking for strategies for dining out, I'm going to share with you a couple of my favorite resources for dining out. Now, back to my original plan is to share with you some food choices. So here we go. Have a bowl of steamed rice. Does this have carbohydrate? Yes. Obviously, that's an easy one, right? So everyone's going to type yes there. Diet Pepsi and Diet Coke. I didn't want to play favorites here, so I picked both of them. These are sugar-free beverages. These do not have carbohydrate. Garden salad. So a garden salad, mostly a combination, at least in this picture, you got mixed greens, you got some cucumbers, you got tomatoes. It does have carbs, but there's a caveat here. It doesn't really contain an amount of carbohydrate that's really going to impact your blood sugar. So yes, some carbohydrate, but not really any amount that we have to be concerned with. All right, next picture. Olive oil. Does it have carbs? We know olive oil has potential health benefits. It's a good source of monounsaturated fat, but it's also very high in calories. However, it does not have carbohydrates, so it is all fat. Next question, next quiz here. Salmon. Does this have carbohydrate? Does this have carbohydrate? Now, some of these, we're looking at, and you got to kind of wonder, well, how it's prepared. Is there a glaze on there? If it's a glaze, it's a sugar sauce that could have carbohydrate, but we'll say this is just a typical grilled cut of fish, whether it's salmon, tuna, mackerel, whatever it might be, no matter what, does not have carbohydrates. Other question just came into the chat in terms of overall carbohydrates in vegetable oils. So it's a great question. Olive oil does not have carbohydrates, and actually no oils have carbohydrates. So whether it's corn oil, canola oil, safflower oil, olive oil, motor oil, just kidding. None of those have carbohydrates. So that's a great question. And last one, bananas and oatmeal. Pretty easy, right? Carbohydrates. So we covered a lot of this in our first nutrition talk, just kind of learning to identify carbohydrate rich foods. And if you were successful in each of those slides, you actually are almost halfway there in terms of dining out healthfully with diabetes. Because really, when we look at diabetes control and trying to manage our blood sugar, it really just involves an acute awareness of sources of carbohydrate. Now, again, we don't want to ignore every other facet of the menu in terms of salt and overall calories. But if you know where to find carbohydrates, it's going to make dining out less of a challenge when you look at blood sugar management. So we're already could be halfway there depending on how you did on that little pre-test. Now, a couple of facts and figures that may not surprise you when we look at dining out trends. Obviously in the pandemic, we saw a significant decrease in dining out, but overall, pre-pandemic, the average American would spend about $3,000 a year. Sounds like a lot of money, but if you start to look at little things like eating out your lunch 2 or 3 times each week, going out to eat as a family once a week or once a month, those figures start to add up. And it's very financially viable in terms of that dining out. So the restaurants can make a substantial amount of money when we're spending that, because there's about a 300% markup on each of those foods that they're serving. So again, very expensive to run a restaurant, but we also see a substantial markup. So if we're looking at not just ways to help ourselves from a diabetes standpoint, we already know from a financial standpoint, there's a significant savings towards transitioning more of our meals to home. But again, the purpose of this talk is to discuss dining out. And here's what you need to know. Even though restaurants are really making some strides at having healthier options available, no matter what the restaurant is, each time you're dining out, chances are you're going to have about double the amount of calories in that given meal for a meal that you have at home versus the same meal that you're eating away from home. There was a study done by Tufts University, I think back in 2016, that looked at a random sampling of a bunch of neighborhood restaurants and some independent restaurants, as well as some popular chain restaurants, and looked at all of the calorie content for those menus and found that it's about 1,300 calories each for those entrees on average. And that doesn't include the calorie count for any beverages that might be consumed, any dessert that might be consumed, just for the meal itself and the side items. 1,300 calories each. Compare that to where many of us might be in terms of our daily nutritional needs. It could be anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 calories a day, depending on our level of activity. So you can see where dining out can really cause a lot of difficulty, not with just blood sugar management, but overall weight management. And if we look at the overall figures, and again, averages are somewhat deceiving because, let's face it, if a billionaire walks in your office right now, on average, you're both billionaires, okay? But these are the best statistics we had. You can compare to where you might be, but the typical American is dining out about 4 to 5 times each week. So that has a chance to be a significant problem when we look at some of the ways that menus are manipulated and how some of the calories and carbohydrates can increase substantially. So we're going to look at some of these menus. You can see how it can increase quite a bit with just a few small adjustments. And we know that's the carbohydrate that we want to pay closest attention to for blood sugar management. But let's take a step back. So we're dining out again, or maybe you're already dining out before this talk, and you're trying to figure out, okay, well, I have diabetes, and I want to make sure that I'm making the best choice for myself, and as well as balancing the needs of any of the friends I might be with, or the family, that might be accompanying me. So what I typically recommend is try to do some homework ahead of time, wherever you might go. If you're going to a chain restaurant, they're going to have a pretty standard menu that's followed across the country. And you can easily find nutrition information on that. But at the very least, if you can find the menu itself and apply some of the principles that we'll talk about in today's session, you can save some of the stress and the anxiety that can fall upon your shoulders when we look at trying to select food from a menu. So it's always good to try to do your homework. And if there's a few options available, I know how it is dining out with the group. It's like, I don't care where we go, as long as it's another 4 places you just mentioned. It's always trying to herd cats when we try to get people to agree on a restaurant. But if you can look at some of the options available and try to navigate your group towards the one that has the most helpful array, your chances of success in terms of blood sugar control are going to go up substantially. So don't be afraid to do a little bit of homework, do a little bit of web searching. I also try to look at the reviews. Now, sometimes reviews can be very polarizing. Invariably, most people are leaving reviews when they're dissatisfied. But what I would really want you to look for, especially if you're an individual who's using a mealtime insulin, is you want to pay close attention to the reputation in terms of service. As many of you know, and what we learned with Rachel's talk last month, insulin acts with food. And if you have insulin on board without food available, that can drop your blood sugar pretty low. So it's helpful to know that. Say, hey, I'm going to this restaurant, but they have a reputation for a little bit of slow service. So I want to be careful when I take the insulin. Or see what they look at in terms of accommodations. Sometimes, restaurants can be very finicky about what they want you to allow you to adjust for your menu. So see what the reviews are telling you. Is this a place you want to go that'll accommodate you, that has prompt service, and go from there? And the other thing I think that is not emphasized enough when we talk about dining out healthfully is trying to put yourself in a position of success by just limiting the impulsive dining out. And I think that is what can be the most problematic, because if you go into a day and you have no idea what you and your family are going to eat for dinner, and you end up getting takeout, again, even if there might be healthy choices available, it could still be double the amount of calories that you might get at home. That's where we want to try to take a closer look, because that's what I would consider unnecessary dining out. It was just because there was no other plan in place. You still want to dine out for celebrations and for socialization safely, but you want to try to limit the impulsive dining out. And goes without saying, if you can avoid hitting a restaurant when you're hungry as a horse, that's going to increase your chances of success, because we all know when our hunger hormones are surging, our ability to make sensible choices kind of goes out the window. And then lastly, we're going to look at some principles for healthier eating at restaurants, but it's really a relative term. You might find yourself at a restaurant where on paper, none of the choices really would hit the mark in terms of healthfulness. But as many of you know that have attended some of our nutrition talks before, my definition of healthy eating is just trying to make the best choice possible at that given point in time. So even if each of the restaurant selections might be well above what you would consider normal for your calorie and carbohydrate amounts, at least try to choose the best choice possible over what's available. If we look at a pizza place, well, Overall pizza, probably not going to be the healthiest option, but if you can find one that's thin crust, and if you can find one that doesn't have, pepperonis and sausages and other high fat meats on there, at least you're making the best choice possible. And that's all we really want to strive for with healthy eating on a big picture, trying to pick the best choice possible at a given point in time. All right, so these are some of the guidelines that I think are that could stick. When we look at rules that we can apply across multiple different restaurants, I think these should be consistent across the board. Now, these are I think guidelines would be the better choice of words rather than rules. Rules that sounds very rigid, not fun. Guidelines. So guidelines for optimal blood sugar and calorie control. I would say try to limit your menu selection to just one carb choice. Since we know we're dealing with much larger portions at a restaurant, if you're going to have potatoes as part of your with your side item or as your side item, probably not a good choice to also get corn or get bread beforehand. So try to figure out what you're going to select for that entire meal and try to stick to just one carbohydrate option. The other thing, you got to really, it says beware of buffets, but let's face it, it might be best to just skip them altogether. The buffet mentality instills upon us the need to really get our money's worth, right? So I want to get my money's worth, so I'm going to at least make 5 trips. Well, that's not going to be obviously the best choice from a blood sugar or calorie standpoint. I think it goes without saying that we'd want to limit fried foods. And then when it comes to beverage choices, water, your best choice, but at least try to keep it calorie free if you're going to go beyond water. So that would be your coffee, your tea, your diet sodas, your sugarless beverages. Those are going to be your best choice, because when we're drinking our calories, it doesn't really hit the same satiety signals in our gut that solid foods do. So you could easily knock down a 200 calorie sugar sweetened beverage. It would seem like you ate anything. So that's a good guideline. And then last but not least, in terms of generality and things that you might remember, when it comes to meat, the less legs, the better. And what I mean by the better, I mean overall in terms of what's typically available on a menu. Now, you can find lean cuts of beef, you can find leaner cuts of pork, but overall, if we're looking at a menu, I would put fish at the top, followed by chicken or turkey, and then beef, pork, and lamb. Okay, that's how I would rank it. Again, yes, you can get some lean cuts of sirloin. That's going to be better than chicken wings, but overall, the less legs, the better when we look at meat choices on the menu. All right, I have a question about air frying. I'll get to that towards the end there, but that's an excellent question in terms of preparation. When I say skip fried foods, I'm really talking about the breaded items, but I'll address the air frying a little bit later. So the other thing that I think is helpful, and this is what we're going to apply right now, is becoming a restaurant detective. Now, I hope I'm not telling you anything earth-shattering, but your restaurant that you go to makes money by selling you more food, not less. All right, so relying on that restaurant as your ultimate barometer for health and well-being is not going to suit you in the long run. Yes, they'll identify some lower calorie choices, but just remember, they're ultimately in business by having you eat more food, not less. What I try to do when I'm looking at a menu is I really try to hone in on the 3 C's. And I know I'm working up, from the bottom of the slide to the top, that's fine. I look at creamy, cheesy, and crispy, or any type of variation of those terms. Goes without saying that anything that's going to be creamy, cheesy, or crispy is going to be very high in calories. The higher in calories it is, the harder it's going to be to achieve a healthier weight. So those are typically what I'm looking for first. All right. So as I'm looking at this particular menu from Outback, I got the cheese fries. I got the golden bloomin' onion. I've got this quesadilla with cheese. I've got the coconut shrimp, fried golden. So again, crispy, cheesy, or creamy is what I'm really trying to scrutinize. And we're going to look take a little bit deeper dive into one of these menus here in a moment. Also look at the terminology. Again, fairly obvious, smothered, fried, going to equate to much higher calories, but broiled, seared, grilled, that preparation method is going to be much lighter. Now, getting to that air frying is not really deep fat frying in the same sense that we see traditional fried food. So I would say that that would be a preferred way for preparation as well, if you find yourself at a restaurant that is doing some type of air frying. So that's something to consider. But if you're looking at a captain's platter or an admiral platter, I don't know if I guess the higher up you get in the military, the higher your portions must be, but that typically is going to indicate a lot of calories. So the smothered, the fried, the captains, the combinations, those are all things that we want to try to steer clear of. And again, you're a detective. Detectives ask questions. So if you're not really certain based on the menu itself, what this actually means, ask the server, say, how is this chicken prepared? What type of sauce is used on it? So if you're looking at a cream-based sauce or a sweet sauce, that's going to indicate perhaps higher calories or higher carbohydrates. So to be a good detective, you have to ask questions, but more than anything, watch out for those 3 C's. So I'm not trying to pick on any specific restaurant, although it does seem like I singled out the Outback. I just found this menu is a little bit easier to cut and paste onto the slide without, making sure everyone needed to have 20/20 vision and staring at your computer screen too closely. But what I like for you to do right now is find what you think is going to be a decent choice for a person with diabetes who's trying to control their carbohydrate amount. So you can type your options in the chat. You can whisper them to yourself. You can write them down for whatever reason. I just want you to be familiar with how to navigate a menu and become the detective we just talked about. There's a lot of options here. So take a few moments and look at this menu and see what jumps out to you as a lower calorie option. And I'll share with you what I found when I did the same exact thing. Now, again, as a detective, there's some things you might have to ask questions about, like the maple mustard glazed pork chops. How much glaze is on there? Maple and glaze, that sounds pretty high in sugar. Alice Springs chicken, I have no idea what that is. I'd want to know, how is that prepared? What is Alice Springs? Give you one more minute here. No pressure, I'm not taking your order. I don't, no one needs to, unless you want to send me your address. I'm not going to mail you any of these foods. Lots of votes for chicken. This is a steakhouse, right? Don't we get steak at a steakhouse? I'm not telling you how to live your life. I'm just teasing you. All right. So I will tell you this. This menu, again, I found it online. It's easy to cut and paste, but it's from Hawaii. So the reason I say that is because I've never seen lamb at an Outback menu before, but I've also haven't been to Outback in several years. So maybe I'm missing something, but I think maybe each area is different. So I'm going to show you real quick, the first glance of this menu, what I thought were some of the better options. Now, again, these aren't the only options, but this is without asking the server any questions. So I look at the descriptors. I've got seared, I've got wood fire grilled. These are mostly meat-based, lower carbohydrate options as appetizers if I wanted to get an appetizer. The salads, that's usually a good reflex, but really I'd want to have more details. What's in the steakhouse salad? What's in this Cobb salad? I did some digging on this particular steakhouse salad. It actually had blue cheese crumbles and a lot of other higher calorie choices, so that may not be the best choice. This pretty obvious, our grilled chicken sandwich, also pretty boring, but and to round out this meal, since we're talking about a fairly large bun in all likelihood, we'd want to try to serve that with something on the lower carb side. So a salad instead of the fries, that would be the best way to go there. But we look at your crispy chicken, not going to be the best choice because of the fried. I went right to the Victoria's filet mignon, but I think the Outback Special could also be a decent option as well. When we're looking at steaks, want to try to push the loin and the round cuts over anything else. And I want to try to keep the portion size fairly reasonable. And usually 6 ounces is the lowest you can go. And that's what I would go for there. I didn't really pay too much attention to these steak add-ons. Some of those are pretty obvious. Grilled chicken, or excuse me, grilled shrimp would be decent. Grilled chicken on the Barbie. Many of you ordered that in your chat. That's fine too. Again, some of the others would just require a little bit more knowledge of how it's prepared, especially the Alice Springs chicken. For you Outback faithful, you could maybe share with me later what that actually is. Freshly made sides, broccoli, mixed vegetables, grilled asparagus. I avoided the garlic mashed potatoes, the dressed baked potato, the Aussie fries, obviously because of the higher carb and higher fat counts, but I also didn't really select the steamed white rice because at Outback, I was going to envision myself having a little bit of that bread that precedes the meal. So I would, again, trying to just stick to one carb choice. But if you skip the bread, then feel free to get the rice. Now, again, these are just general guidelines. Everyone's calorie and carbohydrate needs is going to vary, but just right off the bat, that's what stuck out to me when I look at this particular menu. Now, I did not select the teriyaki marinated sirloin. So I did say loin is a very lean cut of red meat and is typically the preferred cut to choose. But I veered away from teriyaki because of the teriyaki seasoning is typically going to indicate a much higher amount of sodium. So that was my concern there. Not so much in terms of carbs, but more of sodium, why I steered clear of that particular item. All right, Alice Spring has cheese and bacon on top. So that sounds delicious, but obviously probably not the best nutrition choice. So yes, thank you for that. It does sound like a good spring to visit. I think any spring that has bacon, I'd want to visit, but that's beside the point. All right, very good. Now let's go to Chipotle. So what I've done at Chipotle, I went to chipotle.com. They have a nutrition calculator there, and I wanted to illustrate with you just how quickly the carb count can increase for a burrito. So persons with diabetes, obviously it's all about the carbs, but we still want to be mindful of calories. But I just want you to look closely at how much carbohydrate just the burrito itself. So I started to build my burrito and I selected the shell. The flour tortilla was my only option there. And it's 50 grams of carbohydrate. Now, when we used to have our In Control Diabetes program, on average, we were advising most of our patients that were coming through to consume anywhere between 30 and maybe 45 to 50 grams of carbohydrate per meal. So again, just the shell itself is 50 grams of carbohydrate at Chipotle. All right, so if I go ahead and add the rice and beans and chicken and lettuce and a little bit of cheese to it, that number jumps up to 108. So you can see what I mean. When we talk about dining out, it's as much the amount of food that we're getting in addition to the type of food that we're selecting. So even though we put a burrito together with fairly generally healthy items, the rice, the beans, the flour tortilla, we didn't use any sour cream here, it still ends up to be a considerably high carbohydrate count. So that's why size matters. And whether it's a burrito place or a sandwich place, I always opt for the 1/2 portion. Now, a secondary option for places like Chipotle and other Mexican type restaurants is you can just opt for the bowl itself, which basically omits the tortilla shell, and you have your your meat and your beans and your vegetables in the bowl instead of on the shell. And again, that's going to save you a substantial amount of carbohydrates. And if you did the math here, if you just got the rice and beans on top of your meat and whatever toppings, you're still looking at about 58 grams of carbohydrate, but you can adjust that portion by just using smaller quantities of either rice and beans. So again, a lot of variables to consider when you're at a Chipotle, but just want to show you just how quickly some of these choices can add up because of the portion size used for some of the tortilla shells and other additives. So a couple of other fast tips before I share with you some general resources that I think could be helpful for you as you start to navigate your own menus moving forward. Italian restaurants try to keep pasta to a minimum. The standard portion of pasta at an Italian restaurant can be upwards of about 120 grams of carbohydrate because we're looking at about 2 cups of pasta. So if we look at least 2 cups of pasta, that's going to be like 90 grams of carbohydrates. So just keep that in mind when we're looking at some of those options. Besides the breadsticks, you also have to be careful with the type of sauce that is used. We're going to try to encourage more marinara-based sauces over cream-based sauces to help save some calories. But again, more than anything, it all starts with the amount of pasta being added. Mexican restaurants already talked about tortillas. The rice and beans together can increase our carb counts, but also don't fall victim to the chips and salsa trap, because the chips and salsa on the table, if you were to put your whole hand and get the chips out, that portion size of chips is about 15 grams of carbohydrate. Not one chip, but a small handful of chips. So 15 grams. That can add up very quickly, depending on how aggressive you are with your tortilla chips. Probably the most prudent advice, because we tend to want to eat things when they're in front of us. The same holds true with the bread, is to maybe not ask the waiter to even bring it. You know, just keep the chips away, keep the bread away, and that'll make being a little bit more mindful and minimizing the mindless eating a little easier. Sandwich shops, I'd mentioned trying to just stick to the half subs, the half burritos, things like that. Half wraps. Whole wheat would be the preferred way to go because it's going to ideally give you some more fiber and prevent a sharper rise in blood sugar. But more than anything, I try to load as many vegetables as I can into my sandwiches, because your opportunities to get more veggies when you're at a restaurant are sometimes few and far between. So use this as an opportunity to add green peppers and banana peppers and onions and tomatoes and lettuce. This is think of your sandwich as a salad that you can just eat with the bread on top there. Chicken and turkey, those would be the preferred cuts. Roast beef actually isn't too fatty, so that would be another potential option here. But again, it's really the portion size that's going to be key. So don't be tempted to double up the meat, even though meat isn't going to be very high, actually 0 carbohydrate. It's still going to add extra calories. So just try to stick to the regular portion of meat. I went to a nutrition talk once, and that's when I first heard the term, the less legs, the better, when navigating meats. And the young lady was talking about a steakhouse, and I'm thinking to myself, who is going to a steakhouse and ordering fish? So if you want steak, you go to a steakhouse. If you choose steak, stick to the guideline of the loin and round cuts. Yes, the less legs, the better is a good overall guideline, but not for a steakhouse. You went to a steakhouse, you want to eat some steak, just pay close attention to the portion size. And again, as I said before, try to stick to one carbohydrate choice. Skip the baked potato if you plan to have some of the bread that precedes the meal. Salads are always a potentially healthy item, but there's also some pitfalls in terms of overall calories and carbohydrate amounts. So the croutons, the fried noodles, the salad dressings, all of these things can really elevate the calorie counts. And those are some things that we want to be very mindful of, because salads tend to have a health halo around them. But if we're looking at ranch or blue cheese dressing and bacon bits and croutons and fried noodles, you can easily have the same amount of calories as a traditional entree, if not more, when we look at salad potential options. But again, it's always a good accompaniment to a meal because typically if it's just your standard greens, those are going to be very, very low in carbohydrate. All right, so want to kind of play a scenario game with you here. And again, since we're all remote via Zoom, it's not going to perhaps have the same impact, but I want you to look at each of these 4 situations. These are very common situations that you might find yourself in terms of potential excuses, and see if you can relate. And I'm going to share with you some potential strategies to help manage some of these obstacles. So the first one, you go into a restaurant, I intend to eat healthy, but when I get to the restaurant, I see something on the menu that looks so good. How many people can relate to that, right? I think we can all relate to that. So here's my advice. This is where doing your homework can come into play. Having a good understanding of nutritional information on the restaurant's website before heading out is going to be key. See if perhaps you can downsize the portion of that menu or even doggy bag it. So you're looking at items that are so good, and that's fine, but as long as you can reduce the portion size in some other fashion, you can still have that tasty choice. Just obviously, we're looking at a much smaller portion. All right, here's another common roadblock or obstacle to healthier eating. So sometimes I have a hard time stopping even though I am full. The food tastes too good, or it was just there and I kept on eating. How many people can relate to this? I'm raising my hand because I have also fallen victim to this common phenomenon. This goes back to us eating with our eyes. We tend to want what's right in front of us. So if we're sitting there with a group of friends and there's a plate of bread in front of us, or if there's still food on our plate, and even though we are physiologically approaching that feeling of fullness, if it's still there in front of us, we're going to keep eating it. So 2 options. As soon as you're ready, as soon as you are done eating, move that plate away. Okay, and I'm not talking about moving it just a little bit out of your way. Make it awkward to reach. All right, I'm not saying put it at somebody else's table, but move it out of the way so you're not tempted to reach back in it, or put your napkin or your silverware on top of it so the handles are touching the food. Okay, these are just simple engineering tricks to keep you from reaching back onto that plate to eat more food, even though, as it's stated here, you are full. Third one is one I hear all the time. It's a special occasion. I know I'm going to eat more than I should. Raise your hand if you like special occasions. We all do. We're all raising our hands. Special occasions are a reason to celebrate. Those celebrations typically involve food, but I'm going to tell you from a pure enjoyment standpoint, if you can slow yourself down and savor those bites, especially of those rich, decadent foods, whether it's a special type of entree that you very rarely get, or a special type of dessert that hopefully you're sharing with the rest of the table cleanly, rather, in pandemic fashion. Savor each of those bites. Slow down. Try not to shovel that food in. It's important to, one of the jokes I always have with some clients is, when you're going to a restaurant, just try not to eat like you're being held hostage. All right, you don't have to shovel all the food in at once. Just savor each bite. Put your fork down. Savoring that food will still appeal to those senses that want you to have that food, but can help you slow down the rate of carbohydrate and calorie consumption. So that's the most important thing. It's just savoring that situation and knowing that, okay, hey, I'm just going to enjoy this particular dessert, but I'm only going to have a small portion of it. I'm going to savor that bite and really enjoy it. And then the other situation here is very common. Is you go into a restaurant and you have this plan in place. I'm trying to eat healthier because I want to, try to take care of my diabetes and get my weight in check. And I'm not going to eat any appetizers. But then your friends order it and you couldn't resist once they're at the table. So there's a couple of different options here. So one, you can kind of coach your friends to say, hey, look, I'm trying to, do a couple of different things with how I eat. So I was hoping we could maybe skip the appetizer, or you could do the proactive thing and order the appetizer that you want, because invariably when we're dining out with friends, it's less about the food and more about the people that we're with, in my experience. So your people might have a certain preference towards one or two or three items, but they can be sold on a variety of things. So look at that appetizer list and say, okay, well, what is something that's going to be a little bit easier for me to manage my blood sugar? So that could be the grilled ahi tuna, it could be the grilled shrimp, something that we know that's going to be lower in carbohydrate, but you can be a little bit more proactive in terms of what you're selecting there. So a couple of resources in terms of helping you navigate different menus. So CalorieKing.com, MyFitnessPal, FoodUcate, Nutrition Data. All of these, I think, are very helpful resources for learning a little bit more about calorie counts at popular menus. And many of them, I'm not sure about Nutrition Data, but the other three have apps available for your smartphone. So in these apps, you can search the food right in the palm of your hand and find out some of the calorie information wherever you might go. I will tell you this, especially MyFitnessPal, and I see it to a lesser extent with Calorie King, but since these are community-driven applications, meaning users can also enter in their data in terms of what they're observing in calorie counts, you see some pretty strange numbers sometimes. So always do a reality check. If you stumbled upon a website and restaurant is showing you a cheeseburger and it has 8 grams of carbohydrate and 100 calories, chances are that's wrong. Okay, so always try to do a double check if you can, because the apps and the website are not always accurate. I do find that the restaurant website, so if you go to Outback Steakhouse and Chipotle and whatever your favorite major restaurant might be, they're pretty standard across the board. They have pretty good quality control in terms of portion size, because if they didn't, they would lose money. So you can be a little bit more confident in terms of the information you're finding at a typical restaurant website in terms of its nutrition information. And oftentimes you can make generalities based on that information to perhaps a neighborhood restaurant. So if you find the nutrition information at Olive Garden regarding a carb count for a fettuccine entree, chances are it's going to be pretty close to that at your local mom and pop Italian restaurant. At least you have a ballpark. And then you can also fall back on some of the standard sources of nutrition information that we talked about in our first class from the USDA nutrient database, as well as the diabetes exchange list. So the apps are helpful, not always 100% accurate, but they're definitely a good starting point. But I think one of my more favorite resources to use out there, primarily because it's handheld, and this is this calorie, fat, and carbohydrate counter book. So this is the Calorie Kings, who also founded that website on that top page. This is the little helpful guide that literally is, will fit in the palm of your hand. You can keep it in your book bag or wherever. It's available for $9.99 on Amazon. Not only does it cover almost 200 different restaurants, but it also features carbohydrate and calorie information for a lot of just general food choices. So this, I think, is a pretty indispensable guide that I think you'll get a lot of mileage out of, and you can find it pretty cheaply on Amazon, and it's updated every year. And I think you could maybe even look back to previous years and get it for even cheaper than $9.99. So some resources to keep in mind in terms of overall nutrition information. All right, so I'm going to wrap up right here. I'm going to try to see if I can pull up this. Oh, you can't click on it on your screen, but let me, I'm going to cut and paste this link right here. Okay. Bear with me. All right. Okay, so in the chat is a link to our post-test quiz. And so by taking this quiz, two things are going to happen. One, it'll count towards attendance credit for the 100 points for your wellness credit. But secondly, it'll help me compile a very quick email list to send to you the slides. So if you're coming in late and you're looking for the presentation, this is a good way to make sure your name is captured so you get copies of the slides, independent, even if you don't even need the wellness credit. So use that link to take the real quick post test. You could also scan that QR code with your smartphone right now and be taken right to the website to do the same exact quiz. If you have questions about today's presentation, or if you want more information about diabetes counseling that's offered here in our office here in Jacksonville, send me an email. I'm the only Vredenberg in the directory there, so it'll be very easy to locate. Carol, I see your message there. I will send you a copy of this presentation as well. So again, all the information that we've covered today, all of the slides we'll send to you once you take this post test, but the recording of today's session is also going to be posted on our website. So if there's any part that you missed or want to go back and hear again, or want to share with your friends, it'll be on the Diabetes University website under the Employee Wellness webpage. So that brings us to the end. If there's any other last minute questions, you can type them into the chat right now. But I want to let you know that next month, we're going to talk about blood sugar monitoring. All right, so we're going to be looking at some of the different devices that are used to monitor blood sugar. We're going to talk about continuous glucose monitoring to see if that might be something that would be suitable for you. And then also look at hemoglobin A1C measurements. So we're going to take a close look at blood sugar monitoring. So any questions about meters, including our Contour meter program through GatorCare, we'll be covering that as well. So again, thank you everybody for tuning in. I wish you all well in terms of your journey with diabetes. Anytime you have questions, I'm here to help. I'm here to be a resource. If you want more individualized counseling towards diabetes self-management, that's something that I can assist you with as well. So again, look me up in the directory. You got my email address right there. And until next time, everybody, have a good rest of your day. Take care.